The Mark Thompson Show.
He is a British journalist, opinion maker, a guy with a substantial, hot YouTube show right now. I'll have him talk about that in greater detail. He is also, among other things, a distinguished voiceover artist, Kim. You know, myself, a voiceover artist. I had to think long and hard before I wanted to bring on someone who's arguably more successful than myself. I don't...
Maybe the competition, what we call
Yeah,
them?
exactly. I don't want to... I mean, it's not a competition, but I'm just saying if it were a competition, I think he's winning.
Uh-oh.
You can imagine that doesn't make me feel very good. How about it for Anthony Davis, my friends? He is also the voice of Waze now, the new voice of Waze. Anthony
That's
Davis,
awesome.
things are hot for you right now, my friend. Welcome.
It's all luck. I don't know that talent plays a part, really, but it just kind of happened that way. So thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. And,
Oh, my
I
God.
listened to you for
dreamy.
so long on American Idol, and I always thought that I wanted that guy's voice. So, it goes
Oh,
both
isn't
ways,
that
my
nice?
friend.
He opens with a compliment. Very, very well done. I have to say, Anthony Davis. You know,
Just let him keep talking for a minute.
I know
just
he's
wanna
got.
listen.
Mark, it's so nice to meet you. And I listened to you on American Idol, and I thought you do have a great delivery.
Yeah, you
my
really
friend.
do. Mhm.
Hey, Anthony Davis, before I get to what you're doing now with your YouTube, the YouTube weekend show is smoking hot right now. Tell everybody quickly what it's called, and they can subscribe, and they will.
Sure. It's a kind of long-form interview show. You know, do you remember when we used to have dinner parties and we would go to other people's houses? Do you remember those days? And on occasion, you'd have a really good night. You know, somebody would bring up a subject and people would start volleying, and you know, the most eloquent people at the table would kind of come down to those two. But you'd always leave feeling really satisfied and thinking, I didn't want to go to that dinner, but I'm so pleased I did because I learned so much or whatever. So I wanted to kind of encapsulate that notion in a YouTube kind of conversation. It's not really an interview show. It's more of a conversation show. But I try and find really smart people to listen to. I do a lot more listening than talking, you'll be pleased to know. And it's been such an education, just obviously because I've only lived in the US for 6 years, and so I'm only just kind of coming to terms with the insanity that is this beautiful country. But obviously, most of the people I have on are from the US, and they are explaining the kind of insanity of the modern political system and cultural system, and it's fascinating. So it's called The Weekend Show. It happens every Sunday night. Goes out on the Midas Media Network, and we have an increasingly large following. So a couple of weeks ago, I had David Fromm, who's one of the staff writers at The Atlantic, who is a wonderful speaker, and I just think it's definitely worth you checking it out. We had Peter Strzok on last week, who was one of the lovers, you may remember, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page,
The
who
FBI.
were part of the Russia investigation.
Yeah, you do a great job with it. I've watched a bunch of it, and congratulations on its great success. I want to ask you now. I'm going to double back to something you said, which is the 6 years you've spent here in this crazy place, because I do want your take on it. But I wanted to also mention, Kim, Anthony Davis is someone who is part of one of the, I would suggest, breakthrough commercials for Nike that's ever been produced.
Oh.
Okay, and he was a voice on it. And I want to show, if I can, and again, I'll get back to politics in a second. We're just getting to know you, so I like people to know some of the cool stuff you've done, right? And so this is one of those things. I would like to show the whole commercial because it's really a great commercial. And if you're listening on the podcast, I recommend that you actually go to the YouTube show and check this out, because part of, and I'd suggest maybe the essential part of this spot, is the video and the way it changed. Wouldn't you agree with me, Anthony? The images and the imagery is powerful, right?
I think Nike, obviously, they have the budget to make the best ads. This commercial, they spent, I'm trying to remember, they looked at 9,000 hours of video footage to find footage that matched on the left-hand side of the screen and the right-hand side of the screen, with just a line in between. And that's the magic of this. It was the man hours that went into creating this. And
Sure.
over and above that is the message, which is one of you can't stop sport and togetherness. And yeah, I mean, it was a privilege to play a little part in the middle of that.
Yeah,
Can I try to share it?
Yeah, we'll show it, and then you can, everybody listening and watching, you'll pick out where Anthony's in here. Here we go.
Can you hold on for just a second?
Yeah, of course. So we'll get it organized so that Kim can share it with everyone. Here it is. This is the Nike spot. It runs about 90 seconds, I think. So you got it, Kim? Can you blow it up bigger?
We're never alone. And that is our strength. Because when we're doubted, we'll play as one. When we're held back, we'll go farther and harder. If we're not taken seriously, we'll prove that wrong. And if we don't fit the sport, we'll change the sport. We know things won't always go our way.
And the world's sporting events are postponed or cancelled.
But whatever it is, we'll find a way. And when things aren't fair, we'll come together for change.
We have a responsibility
To make this world a better place. And no matter how bad it gets, we will always come back stronger. Because nothing can stop what we can do together.
Yeah, there it is. You can't stop sport. Nike. It's a powerful spot. It almost makes me very emotional to watch it. That's the music, that's the imagery, that's the message. It all works so well, Anthony Davis.
And it won the Emmy for Best Commercial in 2022. And it also won the Grand Prix in Cannes for Best Commercial, which is kind of the dream for any commercial maker. That was the voice of Megan Rapinoe you heard doing the narration there.
I wondered who the female voice was. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
But
did you audition for that, Anthony Davis? Because I don't recall being given the copy to audition for it myself. Did you audition for it? Or?
This is what I was about to tell you, Mark. Is that I didn't know that I had auditioned for it. I every week I do a few auditions. I make them here in this little studio and send them off to my agent, and you never hear, the hit rate of getting booked, especially in California here, where you can throw a hammer out the window and probably land on a voiceover artist. So I get a phone call from my friend Ali, and she goes, I want to be your agent. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're the voice of the new Nike ad. I was like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm not. She's like, no, I'm going to be your agent. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I go online, I look it up, and I see this bit in the middle because of course this was as the pandemic was happening, and so my announcement was that all sporting events had been cancelled. And I thought, wow, they've ripped that off of one of my news broadcasts.
Wow.
They've literally stolen something and just used my voice.
And the world's sporting events are postponed or cancelled.
So you literally said that in a newscast or in another presentation of yours?
It turns out I did audition for it, but I had forgotten. I'd done it a few months ago, and they don't tell you that it's for Nike. They just say it's an audition, right?
Kim, he has so many auditions, he can't even remember that he auditioned for this.
And the world's sporting events are postponed or cancelled.
But Mark, here's the thing you're going to like the most, and that is they used the MP3 that I sent. They didn't even ask me to come back and do it again.
Wow.
They just used the audition. And that is a lesson to voiceover actors around the world. And that is make sure your audition tapes are high quality, because it means that they might just use your audition. And so that's what happened. And I called my agent on a Saturday and I said, they've used my voice. And he goes, yeah, I know. We've been negotiating and I was going to tell you on Monday. So
cool.
There we go. It all worked.
How great is that? Yeah. I
love
that story.
Can we go back to something you said about one of your news broadcasts? As a news person, you've piqued my interest. Are you a news guy as well?
Yeah, well, I started a daily newscast, which started as a podcast and has now kind of grown called 5 Minute News. And I wanted to pick a duration that I could manage, because having been a news guy and a talk show host in England for 20 years, and I had an open line talk show on the radio.
Yeah.
And I left there and I moved here. And a little bit like Mark, kind of coming off his show and there being an audience still reaching out saying, where can we hear you? I felt compelled to start making something. But I realized that there was no real kind of news as I knew news in the US. There was opinion news, and there was infotainment, and there was obviously cable news. And the traditional, like the legacy networks like CBS and NBC and CBS, I think I said CBS twice.
ABC.
ABC, thank you. They were not getting the audience anymore. They were hemorrhaging viewers. And so I was like, wow, there's an opportunity here. In a very full landscape that you would think that there was no room for new news.
Right.
There's actually a huge opportunity to do fact-based, non-partisan, truthful news that is not weighted politically. It's not even about being politically weighted. It's just about people trusting you that you are telling the truth, because I don't think anybody really knows who to trust these days.
It's true.
And so the legacy networks have got a bias based upon the fact that they've been on air for years. And as we know, channels like Fox and some of these right-wing networks, they've nailed their colors to the mast. They're not even pretending to be fair and balanced, despite their tagline. So, I created 5 Minute News, which is 3 stories every morning. It'll be in your podcast app the moment you wake up in the morning, because it drops in the very early hours. And you'll hear me telling you the 3 most important stories that are happening around the world. It's not the biggest stories. There's no celebrity stories. It's just what is most important. And
Excellent.
that means that other networks might not even mention them.
Yeah. All right. I'm checking it out. Thank you for that.
What's your take as someone who grew up overseas, and as you say, has been there 6 years? I want to get your take on what's happening here to our government, to our politics. And then I want to get your quick take on what's going on in the world and our proxy war in Ukraine. But I'm going to start here. And before I completely smear this country, which I think is very smearable, I really think we are losing our, we've lost our moorings, I think, in terms of, what's real and, what lies prevail. Sadly, that contagion has gotten to your country as well, right? I mean, there's a certain aspect of zaniness about what's going on in Britain, too, isn't there?
It is similar. It's not the same, and I can explain very simply why it's not the same. If we imagine a clock, and I'm going to explain it as well as demonstrate it visually, because I know you have podcast listeners. Okay. If we put our hand at the 12 o'clock position, your right wing in the media and in government is very much over to the kind of 5 o'clock position, and our right is kind of at the 1 o'clock or the 2 o'clock position, and so instantly you have a different level. So they would never ban abortion in the UK, for example. It just wouldn't. It's not even on anyone's lips. It's whether it's the Conservatives who have been in government now for about 12 years. That they've kind of maintained power, and consequently austerity. And we live under a thing called austerity in the United Kingdom, which is not a word that's really used here in the US. And the other thing I would say about the UK, just finally, is that we talk about the poor all the time. And notice I'm pronouncing both O's in the word poor. We talk about the poor, we acknowledge the poor, and we seek to help the poor. In America, all I ever hear politicians and the media talking about is the middle classes. But there's not really a mention of the poor. It's almost like pretending they don't exist. And I find that very interesting. Because now I'm from a social democracy country, so we provide welfare for the poor. We provide free health care for everybody, including the poor, including the homeless, including you guys. If you wanted to visit England and you got into an accident, you could go into any hospital. They wouldn't even ask you for your credit card details. They'd just look after you and off you go. And that's very important to me. I grew up with that, and I recognize the importance of that. It's not as good as, obviously, private healthcare, because if you want to get a hip replacement, you're probably going to wait maybe a year and a half in England. But here
they have
in the
that,
US,
that's also an option in England. You can have private health care instead if you want.
Absolutely. And it was also an option here. When Bernie Sanders talked about Medicare for all, he didn't say we're going to take away private health care. He said we want to provide a safety net for everybody else. And again, the media misconstrued that, and politicians on the right decided to weaponize that. And so people thought that they were going to lose their health care because Bernie Sanders wanted to give health care to everybody else. And, they should have mentioned waiting 18 months for a hip replacement because, it's a very good example. So that's what I would say about the differences between the countries. America does not have a social safety net in the same way that England and many of the European countries do. And so when I moved here, and I was like, wow, like there is no acknowledgement of the homeless. I went on Nextdoor, the community site, and people talk about the homeless like they're vermin. And I just didn't get it. Like, we're only really a paycheck away from homelessness. So many people in the US live paycheck to paycheck, and this making people work all hours and only giving people 2 weeks holiday. And, maternity leave in England, is the whole duration of a year. You get 52 weeks maternity leave. Even men get paternity leave. So I just think that learning the difference between the two countries, and maybe this is a lesson to Americans, which is travel more, be inquisitive and realize by looking at other systems that maybe America isn't the greatest country in the world. I mean, it is when it comes to cheeseburgers, hands down.
We
And
talk about
tacos.
that. We talk about that on this show quite a bit, the myth of American exceptionalism and how that is played out in so many different pieces of fact, of message that we grow up with. In other words, it's just woven into our education and into the texture of our culture. So, there's one thing to have national pride, but it's another thing to be delusional, which is, I believe, really what carries the day in this country. But I also think that there's so many spectacular things about this country.
Everything I love is from America,
Yeah,
Mark.
yeah.
Everything. All my favorite movies and plays and songs, they all, most of it is popular culture, I'll give you that. But it all comes from the United States. And that's why I wanted to move here, because I wanted to live this kind of, it's like, living in California is a bit like living in the movies, not just because I see Kevin Bacon when I go for a hike. I mean, obviously that plays a small part. But it does feel, I think it's the inclusivity, and it's the fact that, when the Oscars are on, they close Hollywood Boulevard and I have to detour. And I'm like, oh, the Oscars are on. I didn't get an invitation, but I know that they're on. So that for me is great fun. And I think the people here are amazing and kind of, I think California is it's a kind of isolated country, isn't it? It's coming on to be the fourth richest economy in the world, just California. And so it's not really an example of America or Middle America or the rest of America.
Well, it is and it's not. I would say to you, Anthony, don't you think that what you're describing is the world of Los Angeles, the world of San Francisco? These are islands of progressivism in some ways from a political standpoint, and a sort of a cultural aspect to both those cities that has a full breadth of experience and a full breadth of ethnicities and a full breadth of viewpoints that you won't find elsewhere in California. You don't have to leave.
That's right. I mean, even Orange County was, I would visit there, and it would be a kind of, you'd see Trump convoys, and people with like Nazi flags. I mean, like, seriously? So I totally get that. And I
was just going to say, and you drive from where you are to the Bay Area in the Central Valley and stop along the way, and you'll find the same thing. You'll find very different concerns in California. It's as though, that's why I always say California is virtually ungovernable. There are just so many different, special interests. But please, go ahead.
And then the final thing I wanted to say in answer to your initial question, about the political landscape and the media, is a thing called positive bias. And that is what people really have failed to kind of explore intellectually. And that is that when I say I do a news program, and Kim, I think you'll kind of appreciate this, I have a desire to only report the facts based on multiple sources, based upon and very like non-political. Like if something happens and it's bad, it has to be reported, right? The January 6th insurrection, obviously it's going to be reported. But right-wing media just won't mention it, or they'll pretend it's something else. They'll
Right.
just kind of move it down the pecking order. And so, we have to kind of hold truth very, it's part of being a journalist. And I don't think people realize that is part of the craft of journalism, is putting your personal opinions to one side and just focusing on the story and getting to the truth. But what positive bias does is it's the viewer or the listener who has a political persuasion who listens to it and goes, well, that's not true, is it? Because they're putting their bias onto my delivery or your delivery.
But that's what news really is about. You listen to it and make your own decisions, and instead of having someone tell you what to think, we give you the facts, and then you're able to take the facts and think what you want to think about it. Two different people listening to the same newscast could come away with wildly different opinions on what was just said. One of the things I worry about with news is being a reporter, is if I'm using other people's reporting and, as you say, trying to give the story from all sides and multiple sources, what bias might be included in those reports that I'm not seeing and passing along. That's something I struggle with sometimes.
Yeah, but I don't think there is bias if you seek the truth. And I don't believe that. I kind of disagree with what you've said in a very respectful and British fashion. And that is
That's the best kind of disagreement.
Thank you. And that is that, it is not your job to appease everybody and to do kind of both sides the story. It is your job to report the story.
True.
It's not for you to worry about how people are going to digest it or what they're going to think of it, because you can't change people's minds. Anybody who's got a kind of extremist family member has spent this last Christmas trying to bring them back to reality and has failed.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think, all we can do is stand by the truth of the story and not have our own bias in the way.
Right.
And I think that positive bias, where people will seek out the news that satisfies their bias, their built-in bias, with multiple networks and social media and all of that stuff, that's why your Facebook feed will look very different to somebody else's. And trying to convince that person that their Facebook feed is biased is an impossibility, because that's their reality. And this stuff is kind of deep, and it's very hard to convince the average person that I mean, even my stepfather, who, infuriates me and voted for Brexit, and I'm trying to tell him, you vote Conservative because Facebook told you to. No. And I'm like, trust me. And he just won't have it. So we have to, agree to disagree.
We do cocoon ourselves, and we have these sort of news silos that, so we pick and choose now. So it just really reinforces, as you say, the bias that we already have. We have only another minute or so with Anthony Davis. So cool. I did want to touch on the Waze thing. So you're the voice of Waze now?
Well, this was for the World Cup. They wanted a UK commentator, because a lot of the sports commentators for these types of football events, or soccer events as you know them, are done by Brits. And it's so weird because I'm not a sports guy at all. Like I have no competitive spirit. I just have no interest in sport. In fact, I bought one of those blue LA hats. Is that a Lakers hat when I first moved here? Is that what it is? And I
doesn't even know what it is.
I just thought it was an LA hat. I was like, I'm in LA. I'm going to wear a blue hat. And so I'm in the grocery store, and a guy goes, "So you enjoyed the game last night?" And I was like, sorry, what are you doing? The hat you're wearing. And I literally didn't know that I'd bought a sporty hat. Anyway, rewind. So again, I get an audition to do, navigation, sat nav, and they wanted it in the style of a British sports commentator, and I get a lot of that, weirdly, and so I just did it, and the next thing you know, they said, "Yeah, come and record 1 million different words."
Oh,
and
that's great.
That's what
I did. So, like, what kind of stuff? Like turn left at the next intersection type thing, or what?
You do the basics, so you go at the end of the road, turn left, at the end of the road, turn right, all that stuff. But then, occasionally, you'll be like, as you arrive at your destination, you'll hear me go, "You have arrived. They think it's all over. It is now."
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. How much fun. Terrific. Well, Everything's going better for Anthony Davis than it is for me, Kim. I'm very put off. I'm looking for if I've done a voiceover that I could brag about. And this is the only thing I can find on the spur of the moment here. I'll just really quickly,
This is your stomach.
Hello.
Your stomach is feeling lonely.
Yeah, I'm lonely.
To cheer up your stomach, we've invited a McDonald's quarter pounder with cheese and large fries over for the evening.
I'm pushing
Let's see
junk
what
food,
happens.
Anthony. That's what I'm doing.
Goodness, dare I say there's a party going on.
So,
Put your hands up in the
Yes,
air.
lonely stomachs deserve McDonald's. Like the legendary quarter pounder with cheese, America's favorite fries, and the world famous Big Mac. You go, guy, at participating McDonald's.
yeah. So I'm
good.
pushing.
See, I'm giving you applause now.
I'm pushing food that will kill people, okay, while you're getting people to their destination and celebrating the world conquering COVID.
We've just got to do whatever we can do. You know, I think people forget. You know, we're just hired hands. You know that we have very little control in any of this, and we will literally like work for money. So, and I'm sure you'll agree, Mark. You know, I spend a lot of my time in this little box, and I'm much more comfortable here in this space than I would be at a party or, you know, in a kind of social environment, a kind of a normal environment. So as long as people want us to just stay home and make recordings, I'm very happy with that. I've been doing it since I was like a 6-year-old boy, like recording in my bedroom.
Well,
I'm 48 now. It's still going on.
You must come back and visit with us. We'd love for you to be a regular visitor. Charming, great that we had a conversation about a few things, and I'd love to talk about them more. I'm talking about world events. I didn't even get to Ukraine, so we'll do that for next time. But we look forward to your weekend show. Anthony Davis, find him on YouTube and look up the weekend show. Is there anything else? Please tell us now. This is your big moment for
you can just search 5 Minute News on any podcast app or even on YouTube. Just 5 Minute News, and then 5 Minute News produces the weekend show on Sundays.
Love it, love it. Anthony
You
Davis,
need a
so
co-anchor.
cool.
I'm your girl.
There you go. Kim's available. Love it, Anthony Davis. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.